Here you can see we're back at the data binding function for when we added circles to our map. All this time when we were binding data, you might have been wondering to yourself, how does D3 know which data is on the screen and which data is changed? Well, since we're going to be animating and updating our map, we want to be very explicit about what each piece of data bound actually represents. Here we'll be adding a special function as the second argument to data bind. It has the familiar syntax of any other accessor function in D3, and based on what we return from the function, D3 binds that value to the element selected above. In this case, our nested grouping actually did a lot of the hard work for us. Remember, the key to our nested groups represents the year of the World Cup. In this case, in our key function, all we need to do is simply return D key of the passed-in nested object. In this case, D key is going to represent a string corresponding to the year of the World Cup that the given data point D represents. If we do not specify a key function, D3 uses the datum's index in its array. And while this works for most static use cases, where you're not changing your data array, since we'll be filtering and manipulating our data, we don't want to have to rely on it being in the same order every single time. I also wanted to point out that the nested key is not associated in any way to the key function itself. To use a key function in a data bind, we don't actually have to use a nested object or any object that has a key field. We can simply return any arbitrary value or any value that depends on our data point. We could have just as easily, instead of binding our data by year, bound it by attendance value. In this case, just to make a point, we're grabbing the attendance value of a given year in the values object that gets attached to every nested object. So remember, the key function is much more flexible than the key property attached to a D3 object. And now that we've properly associated a given data row with an object on our screen, in this case circles, by some unique key, we can begin removing and adding circles as we cycle through our years.